In the depths of London, the Ministry of Magic buzzed and bustled, unknown to the muggles who walked above. The Ministry of Magic held many departments, from the departments of games and sports, to the Department of Magical Transportation, and of course, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. At its center stood the Aurors, the magical equivalent of police officers, and in extreme situations, military personnel. During the First and Second Wizarding War of Great Britain, these Aurors were the single most important force against Lord Voldemort and his Death Eaters. Two of these agents would set themselves apart, Alastor Mad-Eye Moody and Kingsley Shacklebolt. A past shrouded in mystery, the Ministry of Magic didn't even know Alastor Moody's birthplace. Though he was a student at Hogwarts, no one knew which house he was sorted into. What was known of the man that would later be known as Mad-Eye was his family name. The Moodys were a pure-blood family with a long line of Aurors. These elite specialists within the Ministry of Magic would be used on the front lines of law enforcement and military might, and Alastor Moody was regarded as their best. During the events of the First War, Moody was responsible for filling nearly half the jail cells of Azkaban. His tenure within magical law enforcement would be renowned. He was more than just a prototypical peace officer, but more an elite expert against the dark arts, with decades of experience. Sometime after the defeat of Lord Voldemort, Alastor Moody retired from his duties, nursing a missing leg, a scarred face, and a magical eye. Over a decade later, after being kidnapped and impersonated by Voldemort's Death Eaters, Moody fought against the Dark Lord again. A noted leader in the Order of the Phoenix, he would participate in the skirmish of the Department of Mysteries and other assumed battles against the Death Eaters. Unfortunately, near the war's end, his life would be taken by the Dark Lord himself. In a fierce battle over London, Moody was hit with a killing curse, dying instantly and falling hundreds of feet below. His passing would be a huge blow to the war effort, but the witches and wizards he left behind carried on, honoring his legacy through their own continued struggle. After Moody's retirement, another great wizard named Kingsley Shacklebolt quickly took the reins as the Ministry of Magic's best wizard. Highly intelligent, incredibly witty, and extremely powerful, Shacklebolt was a great asset to the Ministry of Magic and the Order of the Phoenix. Much like Moody, he attended Hogwarts, though his house is unspecified. For reasons unknown, Kingsley did not take a major role in the First Wizarding War, whether by way of the Ministry itself or the Order of the Phoenix. He did not step onto the scene until after the war, when he was convinced of Lord Voldemort's return. At this time, he acted as a spy, feeding the Ministry bad information on the fugitive, Sirius Black. He also acted as a personal bodyguard to the Muggle Prime Minister, though the Minister thought him to be an ordinary person. But most of all, he took part in the Department of Mysteries battle, where at one point, he took on 2 Death Eaters at once. For 2 years, Shacklebolt stayed undercover until he broke Voldemort's taboo. In private, Kingsley spoke the Dark Lord's name, when oftentimes other witches and wizards referred to him as you-know-who. Several Death Eaters were alerted to his location, and the Great Wizard barely fought his way out of a corner. For the remainder of the war, Shacklebolt was on the run, his movements tracked by the Ministry. He did not reveal himself until the Great Battle of Hogwarts, where he went on to duel with the Dark Lord himself, with the help of Professor Slughorn and McGonagall. After Lord Voldemort's defeat at the hands of Harry Potter, Kingsley was elected as the Minister of Magic. He would go on to reform the foundations of the Ministry, rebuilding what was lost in the war, his legacy marked by tolerance and grace. Typically, I deal with each character in their primes. For this particular matchup, I will not. Instead, I'll be taking these characters as they existed together in the same timeline during the Second Wizarding War, as we have no knowledge of their skill set beforehand. Clearly, Mad-Eye Moody was far outside his physical prime. He was plagued by a career in magical law enforcement. His face was brutalized, he had a wooden stump for a leg and a missing eye. But with each ailment came experience, a better way to defeat a foe, a smarter way to apprehend a Death Eater. Furthermore, it came with a few perks as well. Alastor's nickname, Mad-Eye, derived from the magical eye he used to replace his missing one. The eye allowed him to see in all directions, even through his own head and invisibility cloaks. Yet age and retirement did a number on Moody. Though never clearly defined in the Harry Potter universe, Kingsley was likely a middle-aged wizard. What we do know of Kingsley was that he was tall, around 6 feet 2 inches. As I've stated before, dexterity and reflex are perhaps the most important aspects of a witch or wizard. Unlike a fight between a Jedi or a Sith, which included merits of strength, this was not as important for a wizard. Kingsley's own dexterity would be proven throughout the Second Wizarding War, taking on several Death Eaters with little issue. It's definitely obvious that Kingsley has a physical advantage over Mad-Eye, even when it comes to reflex and dexterity. The one leg up Mad-Eye had, pun intended, was possibly his experience. But this is somewhat negated by Kingsley's own experience in the same profession. While Mad-Eye might have a few tricks with his wand work, it would not be enough to stand up against the youth and skill of Kingsley. Kingsley Shacklebolt gets the edge for his physical abilities. As an accomplished Auror, Alastor Moody would be renowned for his dueling expertise. Like the rest of his background, there is not much information on his wand type. But as an educated guess, I would say he used Dragon Heartstring for powerful magic against the dark arts. His wand would probably be a blackthorn wood, common amongst magical law enforcement. This wood became all the more powerful when it went through hardship with its owner, running in line with Moody's profession. During his time at Hogwarts, he would exceed expectations not only in defense against the dark arts, but in every single subject. This would make him not only a great dedicated duelist, but a very versatile one. It would lead him to triumph over dozens of Death Eaters during the First Wizarding War. What's even more impressive is that he made a special note not to inflict fatal injury to his foes, instead taking them in alive. This would take greater discipline and skill than that of his Death Eater contemporaries who aimed to kill. What's more, Moody, as well as the other officers in the Ministry, were allowed to use the unforgivable curses. First was the Imperious Curse, which allowed the caster to control their opponent like a puppet. Second was the Cruciatus Curse, which shocked one's foe with impossibly unbearable pain. And finally, the Killing Curse. One quick flick of the wrist, and your enemy would fall, dead before they hit the ground. These curses were not only devastating, but extremely difficult to master. Mad-Eye was capable of utilizing all three. However, his time in retirement may have dampened his skills. He was kidnapped by 2 Death Eaters, Barty Crouch Jr. and Peter Pettigrew. During the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, he was subdued by Antonin Dolohov. Voldemort and his Death Eaters still held Moody in high regard. During the battle over London, Voldemort attacked Moody first due to the perception that he was the most powerful wizard of the group. However, I believe this was based solely on perception. Mad-Eye's reputation preceded him. He was so noteworthy for his time as an Auror that no one really thought his skills could have dissipated, but to me, they most certainly did. This does not make Mad-Eye useless in a fight, don't get me wrong, but he is certainly rusty, not as strong or quick-witted as he once was, yet his experience would always be a factor in a dueling scenario. Next to Dumbledore, Mad-Eye Moody was one of the most feared individuals amongst the Death Eaters. Much like Mad-Eye, I would think that Kingsley's wand was made of blackthorn with a core of dragon heartstring. We do know that Kingsley went to Hogwarts as a young man, and considering his profession, he was required to test perfectly in all subjects. The Ministry did not accept many witches and wizards into magical law enforcement. Professor McGonagall even stated that it had been several years since a new recruit had been hired, the last being Tonks in 1994. Becoming an Auror was difficult. Training lasted 3 years, an extensive course on magical combat and investigation. Much like Moody and the other officers, Kingsley was allowed to use the unforgivable curses during wartime. And just like Moody, he did not seem to exercise the practice, subduing dark wizards by other means. Shacklebolt has fought many dark wizards during his career. Oftentimes, he was outnumbered. During the skirmish in the Department of Mysteries, he took on 2 Death Eaters, including August Rookwood. During the battle over London, he took on 5 Death Eaters, defeating 3. In the same battle, he even took on Voldemort one-on-one for a time, before the Dark Lord realized Harry's true location. Kingsley took part in almost all the major battles of the Second Wizarding War, and each time he came out unscathed. He was truly an Auror of his prime. This is strengthened by his other magical abilities. Not only could he produce a Patronus, he could also use it for communication, warning the Weasleys of the Minister's assassination and the approaching Death Eaters. He was also quite skilled with memory charms, altering Marietta's memories to hide the existence of the Order of the Phoenix. Wizardkind respected him, even Muggles adored him. He was a natural leader, a natural warrior, one of the best of his time. Alastor Moody was an accomplished Auror, distinguished for being a Death Eater's worst nightmare, but during the events of the Second Wizarding War, his abilities diminished. In the first instance we see him in the books, he is kidnapped by Crouch Jr. and Peter Pettigrew. Yes, they caught him by surprise, but he had many detectors to warn him of their presence. Also, we know he always had constant vigilance. This would mean that Barty Jr. and Pettigrew simply outdueled him. Crouch Jr. is probably a fair Dark Wizard, but Pettigrew we know is only fair to subpar. So why would Moody fall under their efforts when he has been known to outdo Dark Wizards without much issue? I would argue it's because he simply was out of practice, simply out of his prime. There is more evidence of his diminished skill. In the Order of the Phoenix, during the skirmish at the Department of Mysteries, he is defeated by Antonin Dolohov. Yes, Dolohov is another notable Dark Wizard, probably on par with Crouch Jr., yet Moody was defeated by him. On that same note, during the same battle, Kingsley took on 2 Death Eaters with ease. When looking at Kingsley himself, he handled Dark Wizards rather well, even when he was outnumbered. For this, even with Moody's deserved reputation, I would give Kingsley Shacklebolt the comfortable edge for his magical abilities. Despite the fact that we have no knowledge of what house Alastor Moody helmed from, I would say he was sorted into Ravenclaw or Gryffindor. He was brave, tough, and smart. Of all the houses, Gryffindor or Ravenclaw would probably be it. If there was but one aspect of Moody that was clear, it would be his paranoia. His psychology may have made him insane, but it would also be the chief cause for his illustrious career as the best Auror of his time. Mad-Eye's vigilance would go so far, he would drink only from his own personal flask, as not to be poisoned. He would only eat food that he himself prepared, even in the safety of Hogwarts, and he was particularly diligent with wand safety. Alastor trusted no one. He had no friends, no known family, just himself, his wand, and his magical eye, always watching. But he was a good person. An explanation for all his ailments, his wooden leg, his magical eye, and scarred face, may derive from the way he conducted himself in battle. Like a true peace officer, he took his foes alive when he could. Because of this, I believe he would sacrifice much of his life and limb, going out of his way to apprehend his criminals by the books. Still, this would not detract from Moody's efficiency. Yes, he may have lost a few body parts, but his morals stayed ever intact. Much like Moody, we have no knowledge of which house Kingsley was sorted into, but I would say he was probably a Ravenclaw or a Hufflepuff. I associate Ravenclaw with Kingsley because of his extraordinary wit, which earned him a position in the Ministry in the first place. I associate Hufflepuff to Kingsley because of his good relationship with Muggles and Wizardkind alike. Both the Minister of Magic and Vernon Dursley, a Muggle who had ill will towards wizards, both found Kingsley very pleasing. This was for several reasons. For one, Kingsley was described as having a very deep and soothing voice, but he was very good at hiding himself in Muggle company, wearing the proper clothing and carrying himself with a proper attitude. This attitude would surely carry over into his combative abilities. He could not only keep his composure when outnumbered, but even prospered under unfavorable circumstances. When looking at these two wizards' tactics, separate from their magical abilities or physical abilities, they were essentially on par. They received the same training, they carried out their duels in the same manner, and they both had skills that were generally tantamount to one another. Mad-Eye was certainly far more vigilant, but his showings against Death Eaters during the Second Wizarding War suggest that Kingsley could keep up. With regards to their tactical abilities, I would say both Mad-Eye Moody and Kingsley Shacklebolt were equals, with no significant advantages. The fight between Alastor Moody and Kingsley Shacklebolt would be a battle of crossroads. Moody was a warrior of the Old War, highly regarded, but in his twilight years. Kingsley was at the start of an esteemed career, only scratching the surface. While Moody was in good health for someone his age, Kingsley had youth on his side. While Moody's resume was stellar, Kingsley boasted similar accolades, and both Mad-Eye and Shacklebolt were considerable duelists of their times. Let's set up this fight. Let's say it takes place in the Great Hall of Hogwarts. As a final tally, I would say the advantage to the victor goes 7 to 10. The following is a hypothetical battle of one majority victory. The duelists would stand several paces away from each other, but neither would press an offensive advantage. Instead, much like experienced boxers, they would test the waters with measuring jabs, or in the case of wizards, cautious spells and hexes. The beginning of the fight would just be a size-up, but I think it would be Kingsley who would press an offensive first. But Moody would be ready, blocking and countering each spell, working his way more through muscle memory more than his inherent dexterity. Moody's experience may even land him a hex or two against Kingsley, but Kingsley's youth, his cool under fire attitude, would eventually puncture through Mad-Eye's staunch defense. Though Moody would put up a hell of a fight, making Kingsley work for every inch, he would not have the reflex that he once had in his heyday. Mad-Eye was no longer the esteemed Auror he once was. Now, he was a shadow of his former self, holding on as best as he could, but ultimately faltering. After a grueling fight, Kingsley would stun Moody, or disarm him of his wand, and the old wizard would be defeated. Thus, I declare Kingsley Shacklebolt, the noble, the loyal, the smooth wizard of justice, the victor. Of course, this is all my opinion. Please leave your thoughts and comments below. Do you think that Moody could have pulled through, or do you agree that Shacklebolt has the advantage? Peace, love, and mischief managed.
I only did what was necessary, and I truly do regret it.
Not only would a duel between Bellatrix Lestrange and Severus Snape be a fantastic and close matchup, but it would be very probable as well.
Alright, cool. So you're Hagrid, I am the boy who lived. So I cheated a little bit. I played last night just to see how to play.